A vendor told the woman in the gray hoodie the VIP section was for folks who actually bought tickets. 4 minutes later, she was the only person on that airfield who could save a dying pilot's life. The air show at Port Angeles had drawn nearly 10,000 people to the bluffs overlooking the strait, and Rebecca Hayes was not one of them worth noticing. Gray hoodie. Hair pulled back in a plain elastic. No makeup, no phone held up for photos, no lanyard marking her as anybody important. She stood near the fence line with her hands in her pockets, one thumb rubbing absently over a small metal keychain shaped like a fighter jet. The only thing she'd kept from a life she'd buried 12 years ago. Nobody in that crowd knew her name. Nobody knew that the woman standing quietly by the fence had once been called Phantom at the Navy's fighter weapons school, the instructor who put 7 kills on the board in a single training engagement, a record that still hadn't been touched. They just saw a 38-year-old yoga instructor from the community center on 3rd Street, out of place among the aviation nerds and Air Force families. "You lost, hon?" A vendor selling event shirts smirked at her from his booth. "VIP section's the other way. This here's for folks who actually bought tickets." Rebecca said nothing. She'd heard worse. A cluster of teenagers walked past, laughing. "She's probably just here for the food trucks," one of them said, not quietly enough. Rebecca kept her eyes on the sky, where 2 F-22 Raptors were carving contrails against the blue, engines rolling thunder across the water. A volunteer in a neon vest approached, clipboard in hand, voice dripping with polite condescension. "Ma'am, are you on the VIP list? This area's reserved." "I'm fine here," Rebecca said. That was all. She always said as little as possible now. 10 years of teaching sun salutations to retirees and stressed-out moms had taught her that silence cost nothing and gave nobody ammunition. Then the sky went wrong. The sound came first. A sharp crack, unlike the clean roar of a healthy engine, followed by a stutter that every pilot in that crowd recognized, even if the civilians didn't. One of the Raptors rolled hard, black smoke pouring from its right intake. The formation broke apart. Over the loudspeakers, the announcer's cheerful narration cut out, replaced by dead air, and then by a voice that hadn't meant to be broadcast at all. The young pilot, screaming into his radio. "Mayday! Mayday! I've got a compressor stall! I'm losing hydraulics! I can't hold her!" The crowd's murmur turned into a roar of panic. "It's going down!" someone shouted. Mothers grabbed their kids. A man near Rebecca dropped his soda without noticing. Out of the control tower, a man in a flight suit came running across the tarmac, waving his arms, shouting toward the crowd and the hangar crew alike. "I need a Raptor-qualified pilot! Anybody! We've got maybe 4 minutes before that kid loses her entirely!" Nobody answered. Active-duty pilots who'd flown in the show that morning stood frozen, radios in hand, staring up at the smoke trail with the particular helplessness of people trained for exactly this moment and finding, in the moment, that 4 minutes felt like nothing at all. Rebecca's hand tightened around the keychain in her pocket until the metal edge bit into her palm. Then she stepped over the fence. She walked straight toward the command trailer, and the crowd parted around her the way it does around anyone moving with sudden purpose, still throwing commentary at her back. "She's gonna get herself arrested. 12 years since anybody like her's touched a stick. She'll just get in the way." Rebecca didn't slow down. She didn't look back. Inside the trailer, the man in the flight suit. Colonel Danny Marsh, base commander, 49 years old and about to have the worst afternoon of his career, turned to find a woman in a gray hoodie standing in his doorway. "Ma'am, this is a restricted area. You need to." Rebecca reached into her hoodie pocket, past the keychain, and pulled out a worn leather-eyed wallet, creased soft from years of handling before it had spent a decade in a drawer. She set it on the console in front of him, open. Marsh looked down. His face changed. The card was Navy issue. The plastic yellowed slightly at the corners, but the seal was unmistakable, and the name beneath the photo was typed in block letters. LT, Rebecca, Hayes, instructor, U.S. Navy Fighter Weapons School. Marsh's mouth opened and nothing came out for a second. "Christ," he finally said. You're You're Hayes. Phantom. 7 kills in one hop. That Hayes. No time for that, Rebecca said, her voice flat and even, cutting through his shock like a scalpel. Open the hangar. I need the spare Raptor fueled, and I need a headset synced to that kid's frequency in the next 90 seconds. Marsh didn't argue. 20 years of instinct told him more in that moment than any resume could have. He turned and barked the order before he'd even fully processed what he'd just seen. Out on the tarmac, the ground crew stared as Rebecca crossed toward the spare aircraft in her hoodie and jeans, a helmet shoved at her by a stunned crew chief. She's gonna kill herself, one technician muttered to another. 12 years is 12 years, man. Muscle memory doesn't just. Rebecca climbed the ladder without a word, settled into the cockpit like she was easing into a chair she'd never really left, and ran her hands over the controls in a motion so practiced it looked like she'd flown that exact jet the day before. The canopy came down. Engines spooled. She was in the air in under 3 minutes. Above the strait, the crippled Raptor was rolling in slow, sickening arcs, its young pilot's voice cracking over the radio. First Lieutenant Casey Odom, 26 years old, 18 months out of flight school, was fighting a jet that no longer wanted to fly, and losing. I can't get her level. I'm losing altitude. I don't know what to do. Casey. Rebecca's voice came through, clean and steady, no static of panic in it at all. This is Hayes. I'm off your left wing. Look for me. A beat of silence. Then, I see you. Who are you? This isn't Tower. This isn't... Doesn't matter who I am right now. What matters is you're going to do exactly what I do, when I do it, and nothing else. Can you give me that? Yes. Yes, ma'am. Good. First thing. Both hands. Steady grip. Don't fight her. Guide her. You're overcorrecting on the yaw. That's why she's rolling. Ease off. Watch my wing. Rebecca brought her own aircraft into a slow bank, deliberately exaggerated so the shaking, terrified kid beside her could track the motion and mirror it half a second later. On the ground, 10,000 people who'd spent the last 4 minutes screaming and crying went suddenly, eerily silent, necks craned, watching 2 fighter jets moving together in the sky like partners in some impossible dance. One smoking, wounded, drifting, the other steady as a hand on a trembling shoulder. That's it, Rebecca said. That's it, Casey. Now nose down, gentle, gentle. Not like that, gentler. There. Good. You've got hydraulic pressure on the left side. Still, use it. Don't fight what's still working. I'm losing the smoke, I think. I think the fire's out. I know. I saw it die 2 minutes ago. Didn't want to tell you until I was sure, because I needed your hands steady. They're steady now. Keep them that way. They descended together, the wounded jet and the ghost flying beside it, all the way down through 6,000 feet, 4,000, 2, the runway growing from a gray line into a landing strip with fire trucks already screaming into position along both sides. Gear coming down, Casey said, voice cracking again, this time with something closer to hope than terror. I don't know if it'll hold. It'll hold. You've got this. Flare at 50 feet, not before. I'll be right beside you the whole way. The Raptor hit the runway hard, bounced once, screeched down the tarmac trailing sparks from a damaged strut, and rolled to a stop 300 yards short of the crowd line. A half-second later, Rebecca's jet touched down clean behind it. The silence broke into a roar, unlike anything that Airfield had heard in years. 10,000 people who had watched, certain they were about to see a kid die on live television, screaming instead, in relief, in disbelief, in something like awe. In the command trailer, as the cheering rolled across the tarmac, Master Sergeant Diane Wolcott, the base's public affairs officer, phone still pressed to one ear with a news chopper's producer on the other end of the line, set the phone down against her shoulder and turned to Colonel Marsh with an expression that didn't match the celebration outside. Sir, I pulled her file the second she said her name to you. It's flagged. Marsh looked at her, still catching his breath from the sight of 2 jets rolling to a stop. Flagged how? Not resignation. Forced separation. 12 years ago, a training accident here at Whitfield. I remember it, sir. Everybody who was stationed here then remembers it. Pilot went into the water off Dungeness during a night qual. The official cause was pilot error. But there's a sealed addendum in Hayes's file, and it says she refused to sign off on that finding. Says the addendum was filed the same week her separation paperwork went through. Wolcott lowered her voice. Sir, the commanding officer on that flight line that night was Captain Russ Delaney. Marsh went still. Delaney's a 2-star now. Yes, sir. And he's closing this air show tomorrow morning. Center stage, cameras, the whole ceremony. He's been scheduled for 4 months. Outside, through the trailer window, Rebecca was taxiing to a stop, cutting the engine, popping the canopy. A woman the whole world was about to know by a name she'd spent 12 years trying to put down, standing not 30 yards from the man who'd taken her career rather than let her tell the truth about his. Marsh didn't say anything for a long moment. Then, quietly, "Get her checked out by medical. And Diane. Nobody touches that file. Nobody leaks a word of it. If this comes out, it comes out because she decides to let it." Rebecca climbed down the ladder. Her knees buckled the instant her boots hit the tarmac. 12 years of civilian muscle and 4 minutes of pure adrenaline finally collecting their bill all at once, and she went down hard onto the concrete before the ground crew could reach her. She woke up in a clean, quiet room at Naval Air Station Whitfield, an Ive in her arm and sunlight coming through a blind at an angle that told her it was late afternoon. Her flight suit. Someone had changed her out of the hoodie. Hung on a chair. She stared at the ceiling for a long moment before she heard the sound outside the door. Boots. A lot of them, moving into formation. Colonel Marsh stepped into the room first, cap under his arm, and behind him the hallway was lined as far as she could see. More than 500 airmen, ground crew, mechanics, pilots, all of them standing at rigid attention. "Lieutenant Hayes," Marsh said, and something in his voice had shifted entirely from the man who'd barely believed her id an hour earlier. "You saved that kid's life today. You saved a $68 million aircraft. And you did it after 12 years without touching a stick, in a hoodie, off a total stranger's word that you knew what you were doing." He straightened. "You're still one of us. You never stopped being one of us." Behind him, a young officer stepped forward. The same one who, in the chaos of the trailer an hour before, had muttered under his breath that her reflexes had probably turned to stone after all those years away. He stood at attention now, jaw tight, and when he spoke, his voice wasn't steady at all. "Ma'am, I said some things earlier I had no right to say. I'm sorry. I was wrong about you in every way a person can be wrong." Rebecca looked at him for a long moment. She didn't need the apology, not really. She'd stopped needing that kind of validation years ago, somewhere around year 3 of teaching yoga to strangers who had no idea what she used to be. But she saw what it cost him to say it, and she nodded. "You'll get another chance to be right," she said. "That's what matters." Marsh stayed after the others filed out, turning his cap over once in his hands before he set it down. "Lieutenant, there's something you should know before tomorrow morning," he told her, plainly, without dressing it up. That Wolcott had pulled the file, that the addendum was still sealed but not forgotten, that the man scheduled to close out the air show at 10 a.m. the next day, ribbons on his chest and a 2-star stars on his shoulders, was Russ Delaney. Rebecca didn't move for a moment. The Ive line trembled slightly where it entered her arm, the only sign that anything in her had reacted at all. "I know," she said finally. "I've known where he was posted for 11 years. I just never expected to be standing this close to him again." "You don't have to be here tomorrow," Marsh said. "I can have you off base by 6 a.m., nobody the wiser. Whatever happened back then, whatever it cost you, that's yours to carry or not carry. And today more than earns you the right to walk away clean." Rebecca looked at the ceiling for a long moment, the same water-stained tile she'd been staring at when she first woke. Then she looked at him. 12 years ago, I was 26, same as Casey is now, she said. I was on the ground crew debrief the night a pilot named Tom Reyes went into the water off Dungeness Point during a night qualification exercise. Captain Delaney was running that flight line. He made a call on the approach vectors that put two aircraft too close together in weather he should have scrubbed the exercise for. Reyes died correcting for it. And when the investigation started, Delaney's report said pilot error. Fatigue, disorientation, a young flyer who lost the horizon in the dark. They asked me to co-sign it. I was the instructor of record for Reyes's night quals. My signature would have closed the file clean. And you wouldn't sign it? I wouldn't sign a lie that put a dead man's name on something that wasn't his fault. So they didn't need my signature. They needed my silence instead. And when I wouldn't give them that either, they found a training deficiency in my file that hadn't existed a month earlier, and I was separated inside of 6 weeks. No hearing, no appeal that went anywhere. Just gone. She said it without heat, the way you describe a scar that stopped hurting years ago but never stopped being there. I didn't have proof anybody would believe over a captain's report, so I left, and I didn't fight it, because fighting it meant spending years of my life proving something to people who'd already decided not to believe me. I went and taught yoga instead. It was quieter. Marsh was quiet for a long moment. That's not a small thing you're describing, Lieutenant. No, Rebecca said. It isn't. There's a video of you today with 20 million views. There's going to be a camera on that podium tomorrow morning, and Delaney's going to be standing on it. And if you're anywhere on that tarmac, somebody's going to want a photo of the two of you together. The hero of yesterday next to the Admiral closing the show. Reporters are going to ask you both about it, sooner or later. If not tomorrow, then eventually. That story doesn't stay buried forever. Not now. Not with your face already everywhere. I know, Rebecca said again, and this time there was something steadier in it, something that had been building quietly under the exhaustion since the moment Marsh started talking. I've spent 12 years letting people believe what was easier to believe. I'm not interested in doing that for one more day. The fallout moved fast, the way these things do once the video starts circulating. Someone in the crowd had caught the whole rescue on their phone. The smirking vendor, the dismissive volunteer, and then Rebecca walking calmly onto a runway to talk a dying aircraft home. By that evening, it had 4 million views. By the next morning, 20. And the news chopper that had been circling for footage of the rescue was already booked for the closing ceremony, its producers smelling a second story without knowing yet exactly what it was. The Air National Guard major who'd been running ground operations that day, the one who'd frozen instead of calling for a qualified backup pilot the moment the emergency began, was placed on administrative leave pending review. The young officer who'd mocked her openly in the command trailer had his promotion board deferred. And the influencer who'd filmed herself laughing at the sad lady in the hoodie lost her sponsorship deal within 48 hours. Rebecca never asked for any of it, never watched the video, never read the comments. That wasn't why she'd climbed into that cockpit, and it wasn't why she got up the next morning, put on a clean set of civilian clothes, and drove back through the base gates instead of away from them. The closing ceremony stage had been built at the edge of the flight line, bunting in red, white, and blue, a podium with the Navy SEAL, folding chairs for 100 honored guests facing a crowd that had come back in almost the same numbers as the day before. Many of them, this time, specifically hoping to catch a glimpse of the woman from the video. Rear Admiral Russ Delaney stood near the podium in his dress whites, 2 stars catching the morning light, rehearsing something under his breath with the easy confidence of a man who had given this kind of speech 100 times and expected no surprises from it. He saw her when she was still 30 yards out, walking across the tarmac in the same gray hoodie, and something crossed his face that he covered quickly, the practiced recovery of a man who had built a career on not letting his face show what he was thinking. But Rebecca had spent a night training exercise 12 years ago learning exactly what that particular recovery looked like on him, and she recognized it now for what it was. "Lieutenant Hayes," he said, extending a hand as she reached him, his voice pitched for the small cluster of reporters already drifting closer, sensing something. "Quite a thing you did yesterday. The whole Navy's proud of you." Rebecca didn't take the hand right away. "Admiral Delaney," she said, and let the name sit there a moment, watching it land. "It's been a long time." It has. His smile didn't move, but his eyes did, flicking once toward the reporters and back. "Whitfield, wasn't it? Feels like another lifetime." "For Tom Reyes, it was the only lifetime he got," Rebecca said, quietly, evenly. Not performed for the cameras, not raised for effect. Just said, "The way you finally set down something you've carried a long way." "I've thought about him a lot over the years. I imagine you have too." The color went out of Delaney's face by degrees, the practiced smile still technically in place but no longer connected to anything behind it. A reporter nearby, phone already lifted to record the handshake photo, lowered it slightly, sensing that whatever this was, it wasn't the moment she'd expected to capture. "I don't think this is the time," Delaney said, low, a warning dressed up as a suggestion. "You're right," Rebecca said. "It's not the time to relitigate a training accident in front of a news camera, so I won't. But I will tell you what I told the review board 12 years ago, the same thing that got my signature refused and my career ended inside of 6 weeks. The approach vectors that night were your call. The weather should have scrubbed the exercise, and Tom Reyes died correcting for a mistake that wasn't his. That's not an accusation, Admiral. It's a matter of record, in a sealed addendum with my name on it, sitting in a Navy file that never went anywhere because nobody wanted it to." The reporter's phone had come back up. Others were drifting closer now, the particular gravitational pull of a story breaking in real time. "That file is sealed for a reason," Delaney said, quieter still, the warmth gone entirely from his voice. "It's sealed," Rebecca agreed. "It was never gone. I didn't come here to destroy your career this morning, Admiral. I came back to a Navy base yesterday because a 26-year-old kid needed somebody steady in her ear, and I was the only one who could give her that. That's all I came here to do. What happens with your file now isn't really about me anymore. It's about whether the Navy wants to keep pretending Tom Reyes's death was his own fault, 12 years after the man who could tell them otherwise got quietly erased for trying." She stepped back from the podium, and for a moment nobody moved. Not Delaney, not the reporters, not the row of officers seated behind him who had gone very still. Colonel Marsh, standing at the edge of the stage, stepped forward then, and his voice carried the particular weight of a man who had already made his decision the night before. "In light of information that's come to my attention, and given Rear Admiral Delaney's connection to a sealed personnel matter under review, I'm postponing this ceremony pending a formal reopening of the Reyes investigation. I want to thank Lieutenant Hayes for her courage yesterday and for her honesty this morning. Both took the same thing to give: guts." The applause that followed didn't come from everywhere at once. It started with the ground crew who'd watched her climb that ladder the day before, then the mechanics, then Casey Odom herself, standing near the front in a fresh flight suit with her arm in a sling from the hard landing, clapping until her hands hurt. 3 days later, the review board reopened Tom Reyes's case, and the sealed addendum with Rebecca's name on it became, for the first time in 12 years, part of the official record instead of a footnote nobody read. She wasn't there for that. She'd already walked out of the base gates in civilian clothes, the same gray hoodie folded now instead of worn, tucked under her arm. The wind off the strait hit her face the way it always did, salt and diesel and distance, and somewhere behind her a training flight lifted off, the sound rolling out over the water like something calling her name. For 12 years she had carried her past in silence. Dismissed, underestimated, invisible in rooms full of people who had no idea what she'd once been capable of, and no idea what it had cost her to leave. She had let them believe what they wanted to believe, because the alternative meant reopening a wound she'd spent a decade trying to close on her own terms. But the sky had never forgotten her, and now neither would the truth. She got into her car, tossed the folded hoodie onto the passenger seat, and drove back toward the yoga studio on 3rd Street, where a 6 o'clock class was waiting, and where, for the first time in over a decade, she suspected people might finally start looking at her differently. Rebecca Hayes didn't mind either way. She knew who she was. She always had. And now, so did everyone else.